matters accounting for this board of county commissioners. With respect to which there is conflict of interest or the county such conflict. That you listen to this.
Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you for another day. Lord, I thank you for all your many blessings. I pray that you just go with our county, our community, Lord, our country, as we continue to fight this pandemic. Lord, I pray for everybody that's sick, Lord, everybody that's having care of the sick, God, everybody that's lost loved ones, I just pray for your grace. I pray that you go with us to this meeting, Lord, help us make all the best decisions possible for our community, for everybody, and our decisions to make. Lord, I pray that you just help us keep them in front of our mind and our thoughts, Lord. Just guide us in this meeting. Watch over us and keep us safe. In Jesus' name.
Okay.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We do. I'd like to add 5A. I asked our Department of Public Health Director, Beth Booth, to kind of give us an update on some of the, as you know, cases of COVID that's rising in the area and some other things going on with the school.
Workshop regular July 20th. In a second. Okay. All right. Here we go.
Alright, so I just wanted to give you a little bit of an update as far as COVID in Graham County goes. We have seen a pretty significant rise in our cases. We have had 112 cases in the last 30 days, and about 45 of those have been under the age of 18. So about 30% of our active cases right now are in children. I have a meeting on Thursday with our Board of Education. They have opted to do masks optional in the school system. It is the stance of the state and of our local health department that masks should be mandatory in the schools for this very obvious reason. We have, at this point, probably close to 100 students that are either in isolation or quarantine. And we also obviously encourage vaccination, especially among the teachers and the students that can't get vaccinated. We have quarantine guidance going right now with the school. We came to the agreement last week to do 10 days of quarantine for students that are in a classroom setting. So if they have a positive student in the classroom, the other students have to quarantine for 10 days rather than the 14. The 14 applies to anything outside of that classroom setting. So all extracurricular activities, if they're exposed at home, that kind of thing. The reason for the shortened quarantine period is because it is so controlled in that school atmosphere, as far as we'll know exactly who their contacts are and that kind of thing, and it makes them a little bit easier to contact trace. The biggest advantage to it being a mask mandatory, in addition to the safety portion, is the students do not have to quarantine if it is a mask-on-mask situation. So if all the students are wearing masks and a student tests positive, none of the other students in that classroom have to quarantine. That's one of the messages that we're really trying to get across to the board and also to our citizens, is the masks are considered a scientifically protective equipment. Some people don't, and that's okay, but that's the science stance. And as far as for the teachers, that quarantine exemption does not apply to them, even if they're mask on mask. And the reason for that is because the adult to child transmission is very, very, very high. So they want that teacher quarantining. The teacher does not have to quarantine if they are vaccinated. So if you have a vaccinated teacher and a mask-on-mask situation in the classroom, no one in that classroom has to quarantine. So, I fully understand everyone's stance on the masks and on the vaccinations. But in order to return to a normal that does not include very extended periods of absences for these students, that's the most normal that I can offer them at this time. So I know that there is going to be some debate at the Board of Education meeting, so I wanted to give you, as my Board of Health and also my Board of Commissioners, a heads up on that information. But that is the stance that the state is taking, and as an agent of the state, that's the stance that public health is taking. And we have plenty of general statute and information as far as the quarantines and isolation go from public health standpoint, that I'll be taking with me to the Board of Education. I emailed all the documentation to Jason earlier. If you guys are interested in it, I'll be happy to either get it to you electronically or in paper copy. But I just wanted you all to be aware that I will be meeting with them on Thursday, and that's the information that's going to be so I also wanted to bring it to you to see if you have any questions or any thoughts on it as well. You good? Anybody have any questions with our rise of cases, immunizations, anything like that?
Are people getting vaccinated?
We have seen a pretty stark rise in the number of vaccinations. Our vaccination clinic this week probably is a solid, I think when I looked at it this morning, was over 30 people, which is many more than we've seen in weeks past. So last week I think we had 30 to 40, and like I said, today for our vaccine clinic on Thursday, we've already got at least 30. And we have had some folks interested in the Pfizer event that's going to be going on Friday evening. That's a door-to-door event by appointment only, so you do have to call ahead. But they will actually come to your home and give you the vaccine, and that's for Pfizer. So.
Did you test and vaccinate everybody in the health department?
If somebody was seeking a vaccine that didn't want to come on Thursday, we can vaccinate other days. But a lot of times we'll either send them to Walgreens, because Walgreens actually probably has more vaccine than we do right now. And they do vaccinate every single day. And then Tallulah also has vaccine. So if we only have a random one or two, we hate to open a 10-dose vial to draw one dose out of it. So we do encourage them to seek it at Walgreens or somewhere that has an oversupply of vaccine at this point. But we're not against vaccinating any day of the week. But at least that way, when we open that multi-dose vial on a Thursday, we know we have plenty of people and we don't feel like we waste. Because when you crack the vaccine open, it's only 6 hours.
But just test every day?
Yeah, we test every single day. We offer the rapid test. We only test for the symptomatic because the rapid test is not considered as effective as far as the results for somebody that's not showing any symptoms, because the viral load has to be high enough to show positive on a rapid. When you do the mail-off, what's called the PCR, or the mail-off test, it's a lot more sensitive. So if they're not having any symptoms, but they're like a close contact and they need to be tested, we usually refer them to either Tallulah or the urgent care to see the actual mail-off PCR test. I did get an email from the library today. We've been going back and forth trying to get StarMed set up to replace LHI, who was down by the school. And that's just been a real slow process trying to get that communication open, but also get those arrangements made. But I am actively trying to get somebody to replace the one that closed at the school. So.
Are these quarantines at school, or are they requiring a negative test after they're over with, if they're not symptomatic or not?
As long as they complete a 10 to 14-day quarantine, they do not have to have a negative test. The teachers, they're looking to shorten that quarantine because they can require that negative test. So they are looking to shorten them because they are considered an essential employee. So they can shorten those down. They can't shorten them for the students, but they can require a negative test for those teachers before they return. Yes.
Like a rapid test or PCR test?
Either one. Either one. And if they're symptomatic, all those rules go out the window and they have to quarantine full 14 days and have a negative test.
Okay. Have you had anybody interested in doing the booster?
We've had a tremendous interest in the booster. I'm glad you brought that up. I didn't do that. Okay, so here's the deal with the booster. It's not a booster yet. They are calling it the third dose. And the reason they're calling it a third dose is because it is specific to the severely immunocompromised. So people that have had organ replacements, they're on active chemo treatments, they are on some kind of active immunosuppressants, anything that they know their immune system is not going to uptake that vaccine like it should. They're offering those a third, what they call their third dose. They are looking at the booster, and yes, the booster is coming. It hasn't hit yet, but we have already started a list of folks that are expressing interest in the booster. But it has not been approved as a booster yet. It's just as that third dose for our really, really sick folks that we know the vaccine probably did not work as effectively.
Are there any data that indicates whether there will be some side effects, such as when you had the first round of shots, if there's any type of side effects associated with the third dose?
It's very similar to the second dose because your body has started to develop those antibodies. So anytime you're developing antibodies with that next dose, you have the potential to have the same type of side effects, the headache, the chills, the muscle aches, just because your body's built antibodies. And if the vaccine's doing what it's supposed to, it's strengthening those antibodies and building more. But as far as adverse events, significant, which would be different than side effects, that would be events that would require a medical evaluation. There's no documentation or no data that supports that that's an issue.
Anything else?
Thank you.
You're welcome, and thank you guys.
Thank you. All right. Good evening, commissioners and staff and everybody that's came out tonight. I'll go over the manager's report first. You should see the manager's report on the S2 packages, one manager, one project manager. One with the longer 11x17 plan layout will be the manager's report. We'll go over that stack of papers first. I'm going to touch a little bit on some of the things that we've been going on in the county since the last time we were able to meet. As you know, we've been working on the gym. I've got some updates on the elementary school gym. We had the soil, the bearing report that I provided at I think it was 2 meetings ago. We did get the status back from the ground penetrating radar report, so I provided S and ME's a separate report for the ground penetrating radar work that was conducted for the purpose of checking the existing brick walls for the presence of steel reinforcement and the soil around the perimeter of the building to attempt to detect any evidence of possible voids or sinkholes. I've also provided from those findings and the soil findings, Colossal engineer, structural engineers recommended fixed design. Crandall County Schools is preparing an RFP to go out for that fix, to get bids. Now, the first document you'll see from Colossal Engineering was actually requested by the school, letting them know that that was okay for them to utilize the facility, the daycare center adjacent to the gym, but recommended not being out in the playground. And that was just a good cover for them to be able to use, continue to use the daycare facility. That's what that colossal engineering basically states. And then as you look through the S and NE structural report, ground penetrating radar report, basically, this is going to tell you about what was found and maybe what was not found with the results. If you look at our first page that has the pictorial page, and it says figure number 1 on the attachments part, you'll see the yellow lines is actually the direction that they ran the sonar equipment. And when you look at the next page, figure number 3, the blue lines represent how they ran their equipment on the walls to do their penetrating radar. Basically what that is was to find out what kind of reinforcement was in that double brick wall and to see if there was any anomalies. As you read through the report, I provided this for you to look through, whether it's tonight or after the fact. We can always go over it later. It basically is saying they couldn't really determine that there were any voids. They also weren't able to confirm there was a footer, but they do believe with some reasonable engineering design features for the building, they figure there's a narrow footer under the brick walls, although it's not structural. And you'll read through that as you see that. What they did find, as you look at figure 1 again, was anomalies A and anomaly B. And to them, it tended more toward being something that's a fill material. And you'll see the anomalies on figure 2. And as you read the report, you'll see where that references that. More like there's something in there that's some sort of fill material that's causing that to register on their DPR. And then lastly, what you'll see on the last couple of figures is what they project the interpreted reinforcement to the wall, where they figure the rebar is from their GPR assessment of the brick on both sides, how they think the reinforcement is running. Again, the red line, the dotted line, represents what they think is the representative or interpreted reinforcement in the brick wall, and the blue line is how they ran their equipment across the wall to determine that. From those findings, as you see the 11 by 17 print, this is what the engineer is recommending to fix. And this is obviously a repair, and it's not a demo, which is probably a better outcome than what we all had anticipated. They feel like because of the structural integrity, although it was damaged at the bottom of the brick, the double brick, it's not structural to the skeleton of the facility. And this is their fix. As you can see, it's basically mounting brackets, metal brackets, in one place at the top, to both of your wood columns, and then as you see the one detail against the block wall. And then if you see the flag detail to the right of each one, that is a welding symbol. So there'll be some welding involved to each one of these brackets and then fastening to the wall. From what it was explained to me, they're not looking at trying to bend the wall back in. All they're trying to do is stabilize it in place where it is now to get it to stay for another longer period of time. That's basically where we are with the facility and the repairs that have been recommended to be fixed. Provided those. If there's any questions, we can always go over that or look over it, however the board wishes to do. If there are no questions on the school gym, I'll move on to the football stadium lighting. Just in time for big football game on Friday against Asheville High. I was informed that the lighting is installed and has been turned on. They've tried it already, no issues. They will be using it, to my knowledge, Friday. I don't think they've had the lighting on completely for a long period of time, so hopefully nothing will happen from that. But from what I've been told, and again, I'm hopeful to see maybe possibly Friday, a significant change and impact with a lot better lighting from what they had previous, and very excited about that. There's some tree trimming that may be having to be done for one set of the lights, where after they got everything put up, it casts a little bit of shadow on the field. But everything is working. They said it was simple as You turn it on with a key. When you turn it on, hit the button, they come right on. Turn it off. If you want to turn them right back on, you turn them on again. There's no delay. All LED lighting, so really nice. And again, I would say that this is something that it benefits our school system, but also benefits for the fans that like to come out and have something to do on a Friday night. And we'll be able to host, obviously, football games later in the season than we would have, if we make it, than we would have been previously to having the lights being installed. So it's a wonderful thing for the community. The community loves to come out and take part in our high school athletics. So a good thing all the way around. If there's no questions on the lighting, I'll move on to the frustration that we have with our new sanitation department Mack truck. We've actually used this thing about 5 days since we bought it. I saw this August 13th update from the Parks Department, and I know Gavin stays on the phone with them regularly. They're getting their Parks Department superintendents and supervisors involved. It's just delay in the global market and the shortage on parts. That's why we're delayed getting these parts and getting them fixed. It's still the minor parts that we understood there was to get it fixed. Is that hee-haw? What was that? I like it. A little bit of mood music for. So anyway, we continue to beat all in to try to get our brand new truck back that we haven't been able to use. We have both the 12 and I think what was the other one? I think the 99. They're just barely limping along. The guys over at Sanitation got to hand it to them. They're making it happen. So pretty tough, but we'll get there. We'll get it eventually. Are they building new trucks? They're building trucks. Yeah, that's a good question. I think everything is slow, but I'd have to look into that. I mean, just give us another one and take this one and keep it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it took us about 10 months to get the truck after we ordered it. So.
She's not gonna follow in the line.
Not a lightning strike.
Yeah, the lightning strike kind of put us in the.
I think Jay needs to write in the letter, from the one truck fixed.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
How much did you pay them for that?
273.
273,000.
273.
We used it 5 days and they didn't get for it. Whoever said that one off of a new one, I think that's what they ought to do. I think they overstep.
I would agree with that. We're looking into that for sure. I had a conversation with Gavin yesterday, so we'll look into that.
Susan won't tell you, right? Whatever, everybody object to that.
All right.
Blistering top.
Pardon?
I said blistering top.
Yes, that's right. We pay cash for it, because we finance it. They got their money. We need our truck. So,
Amen. All right, then moving on, talking about the sanitation department, there's a USDA has additional funding specifically for sanitation. There's an additional $47K available. We're currently working with the USDA on that and the sanitation department on allocation. Did you have anything else, updates on that, or is that where we're still staying?
Yeah, we need to probably have a conversation with our liaison and just make sure, whatever ideas we've got will fit the scope. If it won't, then that's where we would go back and write a letter to change the scope. So we just need to have that conversation.
We'll work on that. If there are no questions on any of the sanitation things, I'll move on to item 5. As we brought up in that, it was a DSS meeting, the Graham County Atoll landfill. Working with NESCO, and I actually talked to Jay Zimmerman with NESCO while I was out at the NCACC. And they're validating the additional monitoring well requirement with the DEQ and the Forest Service and DWM. I should have that information. He was going to give me additional information. And they were just considering the application that I had brought, was just considering letting them, just giving them approval to access the site. It doesn't obligate any approval to proceed with any work or putting any wells in. It was basically just being able to get behind that gate and I guess just to do a site survey of the area. So they were asking if we could consider signing it for that purpose. It's just an application to access. Jay Zimmerman with Nesco. And it's just a process form for the Forest Service to be able to get back. So I'll hopefully get the information this week, and then we'll look at signing that once we get that information. I'd rather wait until we got that and go forward. And the last item on the manager's report is I forwarded you an email regarding, and you should see this Department of the Army, which I think Larry's actually here. He's been in communication with them too, emergency management. I think it's actually quite fascinating, would be interesting to work with. It's just a civil affairs battalion, and Larry may have worked with him in the past. Obviously I haven't, but I've worked with the Army with this kind of thing before. They're basically just wanting a letter of notification that they'll be in the area to conduct training. They're going to want to sit with myself, with Larry, the EM department, and potentially with the county commissioners, and just, it would be almost for them to find out how our process works when there's an emergency, how we deal with maybe NGOs, non-government organizations, or how we would potentially deal with government organizations. So it's a training evolution for them. It's just them notifying us they'll be in the area. The good thing about it is it also gives us something to think about and knowledge for us with the potential of what resources we may end up having to. So that's all that is a letter of notification, which I thought again is well worth it. It would be interesting, and I'll be glad to spend the time going over all the information that they want to use when they get here. Potentially in November, 1st of November, when they're potentially going to be in here. And that's on the form. If there are no questions on the manager report, we'll jump over to project manager report. We have a packet of information. First item is the RDA Moose Branch subdivision. We finally sent all of the signed, initiated, corrected bid forms, and obviously it's been awarded. That'll be the Moose Branch subdivision where we'll be putting in sites. It'll be basically a road and some sites and some utility connections. No, it won't be any sanitary. That'll be septic by the person who buys the property. That's been approved. We have the extra money. It's been awarded to DR. We are in the process of scheduling the pre-construction meeting now, which should go down around the first week of September. So absolutely excited about getting this project kicked off. I have been in contact with Shane and DR. There are some delays, as you might figure, with drainage structures. The biggest thing, pipe right now is not a problem, but structures is. Hopefully, we'll be able to work through that, but get this thing for discussion. It is. Then I asked the question, it has a lot to do with their contract. We'll dig more into that.
they use lots.
Yeah.
What do you think that?
It was lowest. Well, that's low.
Yeah. Motion.
That's it.
Second.
I'm back.
All right, thank you. Moving on to a little bit on the new office renovation for Board of Elections. Total project's about 16% complete. Total framing is about 65% complete. What's left is basically we've got to move this wall out where the door is, moving that, and then the framing that has to be completed all the way to the roof deck. That's basically all that we're going to be done before the framing, and so we'll start our MEP rough-ends from there. But it's moving along pretty good once we start framing. All permits are pulled, obviously, and Jacob's right next door, so we'll be working closely with him on it. And we've been talking about things once a week, almost about different things going on in there. And I provided, the next one is the 6th grade wing addition. I provided you the schedule, the project, the progress schedule from Western Builders. And they're 22% complete on that 6th grade. Becky and I are working also with some of the grant money and LDSI for the slow snow work. From what I understand, they had finished the Little Snowbird Creek remediation. It was within about 75%, and we got this additional work, and they're working on it. So everything is total about 50 to 55% on the design of that, and we'll expect another phone call then, a conference call, to discuss the project going forward. I would hope this week or next at the latest. Now, when that design is done, it will go out for bids and contracts as well.
In favor? Anybody got anybody?
All right, if there are no questions, thank you. That's all I've got.
Okay.
All right, good evening. Just wanted to give you our finance report through July 31st of 2021. We had closed our general fund bank account balance at $8,650,301. Just to give you a little perspective on that, the local government commission requires that we keep up to 35% of our budgeted expenditures in fund balance. In addition, they also require us to keep approximately about 10% in addition by state statute. So I did the calculation on that, and that leaves about $1.2 million in general fund expendable funds. What no puns intended today, but what you would call your rainy day fund. So I just wanted to kind of give you that perspective, because a lot of times when I give numbers out, they look kind of large, but after you whittle down what the local government commission says we have to keep, then it's not always as rosy as what we say it is.
There was a pretty small amount of the property, so.
I'm sorry. I'll get you some glasses.
Whatever to the copy there, I do grab all three.
I'm sorry too, it's hard. I don't know what happened there. And the lighting in here is not that great either tonight. Our capital projects fund, we got a little bit shy of $2.5 million. And that fund is toward our courthouse and then our other capital projects. The last numbers that we got on the courthouse was going to be like around 24 million, so we're about 10% there. So that's going to require borrowing, obviously. And then we've got our capital project fund for the school, $114,000, and then the American Rescue Act is a little bit shy of $820,000. If you look on page 4, you'll see our tax collections for the month. We had $855,000 in current year taxes, which is a little bit shy of $100,000 more than this time last year that was collected for the same month. Our prior year taxes were a little bit under $24,000, so we had about $879,000 in total real estate taxes, and a little bit less than $57,500 in our BTS. Our tax collection rate at this point was 12.65%. This time last year, it was 11.09%. We have not gotten our utilities discovery yet. You'll probably see that in next month or September's numbers, and that'll boost that levy up just a tad. Page 6, you'll see we had revenues of $1.3 million in our general fund, had expenditures of $945,000, leaving a surplus of $360,000. That number will drop some. I'm at this point working on the audit and gathering accruals. I've pulled out the sales tax we received, and that'll count in the last fiscal year as well as our BTS. But there are some other receivables that I'll be booking. So you'll see that number drop for the July results. This time last year, we were at $561,000. So you'll see that number change, bottom line. Page 7, you'll see on the sales tax, this was for collections made in June, $255,788. That's exclusive. That does not include, it was a little bit shy of $26,000 in your quarter cent for the capital projects, and just to give perspective there, since the quarter cent sales tax went into effect, we collected a little bit less than $522,000 that has been moved into the capital projects fund. Any questions on that part of the report? On your budget, you get your budget report for the month of July. Obviously, we've got a brand new year, so pretty much all the departments are right within budget. If they're not, it's very explainable. But we should have 92% left in the budget, and as of July 31st, we had 95.63% in the budget. At this point, obviously, there's no departments that are running ahead of schedule. Any questions on the budget report? I do have 2 budget amendments. One is some good news on the sheriff front. We had budget amendment number 3. The Sheriff's Department received $9,183 in a Nantahala Trust grant. I think this went for safety supplies, or is going to be for safety supplies. So we just need to increase their budget for those expenditures. There's no match requirement to that grant. It was just all grant dollars. And then also for the Sheriff's Department, we have budget amendment number 4. This is representative of the insurance proceeds that we received to do the repairs to the sheriff's cars when they had all the, I think it was the Humvee, that issue. Excuse me. And there'll be some more probably expenditures when we fix the building that's involved. But this is basically expenditures for repairing the vehicle. Now we need board approval for these amendments.
We have a motion to approve budget number 3 and 4.
Motion.
Have a second.
Second.
Okay.
Okay, I have one more item. As manager Marino stated, the stadium lights are up and running and ready, and so I am now ready. I reached out to the schools earlier this week to see if we had a good final figure, and I got a final invoice. It's $291,308 that the board approved last fiscal year to make that expenditure as a capital project or capital expenditure appropriation to the schools. I would just need approval to write that check because it's way above my spending limit.
We have a motion to approve. Have a second.
Second.
Okay.
All right, we got several large expenditures coming for September. We've got our QZAB. Note payment will be a little bit more than $84,000, and then we'll have our first payment of the year on our P&J, our Health and Human Services. So you'll see some pretty large expenditures showing up pretty quickly in your financial. That's all I have.
Do we have any public comment?
No public comment.
No one's signed in for public comment.
You need to wait on Dale to come back for the discussion.
I'm gonna let my bell all that.
I was looking to see if
It's
they-
not adding.
Yeah, we would. Discussion items.
Action needed on releases and discoveries.
Have a motion for those who discover.
Motion. Second. Next item would be the possible renaming of 3 falls on Sanitation Creek. Proposed names: Venus Camp Falls, Stewart Falls, and Santiva Bluff Falls.
Madam Clerk, can you explain what this is about?
Yes, sir. We had received a request from the U.S. Board of Geographic Names to name 3 different falls in the county, certain names, and Vice Chairman Eller asked that I reach out to Marshall McClung because he's always, he knows the area real well. This is in the Santiva area. And his recommendations, he and Hoot Gibbs, that we know Hoot by, came up with the recommendations, and he was telling why. Like the first one, they asked that it be called ATSADI. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that, but they wanted to. The recommendation from Hoot and Marshall was Venus or Venus Camp Falls, because that is where the Venus Camp was located. The second one, they had requested that Elisa's Falls be named after some person that had died years ago, not from Grand County. And they recommended, Marshall McClung recommended Stewart Falls, because it's just, Stewart Cabin is located approximately a half-mile downstream from these falls, and they recognize them as the Stewart Falls in just the general public that hunt out there. And the third one was, they had requested Little Huckleberry Falls, and again, Marshall and Hoot said that's quite some distance from Little Huckleberry Knob, so their request was Santiva Bluff Falls, because that's what the hunters and the fishermen refer to those falls as. So we have to fill out this paperwork and send it back to them, with the commissioner's approval of the names of the falls.
Do I have a motion to take Marshall Hood's recommendation for the name of these falls? Have a second? Okay.
I'd like to make a comment on that. On that information he sent out was, he had published it in a book and had named his files himself. And I thought that was a little bold for somebody just to go from somebody not even from this county, just to name the files himself. And, but I do appreciate the marshal and what they did on that, because that was totally off the record on what somebody did.
You know business.
Your own business. You have it in your own business.
We got any discussion over the, whatever we call it, money?
ARPA money?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been working on some scenarios of, how we can do the premium pay. And my first run through was $3.4 million, so I'm obviously having to sharpen my pencil quite a bit. I'm vetting through the employee census, because if you'll recall from our workshop, the money can go, obviously through to our public safety, folks, but in addition, they identified obviously public health and, human services as well. But we're being mindful that anybody that telecommuted would not be eligible. So what I'm having to do is go through basically and pick through, line by line our employee census and figure that out so I can get better figures for it. My plan was to try to get that done for this evening, and I got that round figure, but then the state auditor decided that we needed to accumulate all the reports we've been sending in for the CARES Act money into one spreadsheet so that they can start doing their audits. And they gave us 48 hours to get in. So just before I came in here, I got all that uploaded. So my next project is to finish that vetting and then bring it back to the board. And I would probably recommend or ask that you may want to schedule an additional workshop so we can go through all of those, and in that way the board can make some final determinations as to what you might want to do for premium pay.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear that.
That would be my suggestion, workshop specifically for this, so we don't have a business to go over and not wait another month.
Do we need to try to set a date, or do you need to let us know when?
Well, my plan is to try to have all this finished by the end of this week, so maybe sometime next week we can be ready.
Okay, just, when you get your timeline fixed, check with us, see if there's
Okay.
anything.
All right. My goal is to have that done by Friday.
How many, employees are we looking at that would be eligible for some type of?
I would say, probably around 150, because once you start adding all the health and human services, maybe a little bit shy of that. That's just my first lunch on my first guess. But I think it's gonna be really important for the board, because if you'll remember from the workshop, they said any local government employee was eligible. But I think the intent of the act is that anyone who was truly in a position to be exposed
Right.
would be the first line. And that's why I'm trying to vet through, who was here, who wasn't, and then what departments that the board would probably feel most likely to prioritize.
And we have, what's the total dollar amount?
We have, in the first tranche, we got a little bit, less than, we got about $819,000 in the first tranche.
Right here, setting some of the highest
Yes,
on the list, the one that had the right back behind.
yes,
6 people,
absolutely.
or, commend our health department too, but they didn't have to do what these people done.
Correct. So, that's my thought is look at it from the perspective of who was the most directly exposed to the disease, or still are being exposed to the disease. And that's to me what my recommendation would be.
Larry, how many you've been told since the second wave started now, you know? Just
I'd
rough.
say at least 25 to 30 in the last 3 weeks.
And so far, we ain't had no employees to catch it in the back line. That's so far. So there's another hat off to them for their protection.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Right. Anything else? Now a motion to go into close under GS 143, 318, 11, A1, 3, 5, 6. Privileged confidential information attorney, client, privilege, personnel contract with the inmate group. Got a motion second, third, all in favor?
Right behind or something.
Well, it was a good deal. We were so effective when we got it. And I think it caused a quicker delivery time. I think it was.
You know, they just said, well, last year.
And they do the park and park room.
Okay.
This will be a whole bunch of different people like this.
You ready for this important business?
Let's do it.
We have a motion to adjourn.
Yeah, can I make that motion?
Did we have a second? All in favor?
Thank you. Just time to sit in.